Recording with David Gosselin. I've been incorrectly, I think, addressing you as Dr. Gosselin. But to me, it's always a safer bet to just assume someone's a doctor and be wrong versus someone being a doctor and you not calling them that. Um, but for everybody listening, today's Tuesday, February 28th, 2023. And this is, I don't even know what, 1,100. I don't know. My brain's cooked. Fire alarm went off today, and as I was just telling you, it only goes off when it snows here. Why? Because fuck it, that's why. But real quick, please introduce yourself, my friend.
Well, my name is David Gosselin, and I'm the founding editor-in-chief of the Chain Muse, which is a journal of classical arts and letters dedicated to promoting timeless culture, timeless art, in a time when there's a lot of ugly stuff in the world, right? I think, or I thought, or I believe that you can only learn so much about health from studying sickness, right? You can only do so much to address all the ugly things in society by just trying to analyze and break everything down into different parts. That won't necessarily get you beauty or truth or goodness. And so the guiding question has always been, well, how do we get to the real thing, as opposed to what we're always usually presented with, right, in mainstream media, mainstream culture, where they're pretty much, in Plato's terms, imitations of the real thing, right? Things that feel right, narratives that seem to make sense and explain a lot of things that are going on or that's wrong with society. But then there's all sorts of suggestions and depending on the images that we use, it paints a very different picture of where we've been, right, where we come from, and that really influences how we think about writing the next chapters. So I like to really look at the whole connection between psyops and propaganda, and the role of real culture in battling that real goodness, truth, and beauty, which is, I think, really what we need, right? If we don't have that, then it doesn't matter how good we are at dissecting problems.
Yeah. And for anybody listening, sorry, I'll link the article we're discussing, Transcendence and Trance War. And I read it, and it's kind of I've never read this book, but it makes me think of the term the simulacra and simulation, where it's like everything's just a copy of a shadow of a reflection, and like it's good. It's good in 1940 when you're crafting like the common myth to go fight arguably like a necessary evil. It's necessary to do this to fight the evil, right? Concentration camps. It's like, all right, we're gonna bend the truth and put out the propaganda, but
Yeah.
it seems like we're deviating farther and farther from any even attempt at a realistic depiction of our own reality.
Yeah, and it's a dangerous thing, right? It's a sticky thing, because once you get people used to emoting with certain ideas, and then they become anchored, right? Their worldview is anchored in those ideas. And so then when you're dealt with real world situations that are always changing and fluid and developing, people tend to be very formulaic, right? They're just imposing uh, the images that they've been given with the logic and trying to apply it to a different situation. And it often doesn't work, right? If we're looking at geopolitics today, or is it really a capitalist free West battling the common
Soviet bloc,
specter?
yeah.
And what is that? That manifests itself in all sorts of ways, right? In terms of the art, that everything is very much about, like, or the idea of free expression and freedom. And it's almost like that is the brainwashing, right? It becomes the mantra that we're in a free society, and da-da-da. And so no matter what's done, they're like, but we're still in a free society. But that's really what the Brave New World is about, right? Giving people, well, there's the understanding in, you mentioned, the World War II period, post-war period, fighting fascism. And I mean, the powers that be, the bad guys saw that, the boots on the ground, tyranny kind of stuff can only go so far,
Hmm.
right? Like people will always revolt as long as if it's not in their hearts and minds. And so the key is getting in people's hearts and minds, winning over the hearts and minds. And then they can agree to all sorts of stuff, right? And I think that's where art and culture plays a big role. These are, going back to Plato's time, the poets were the image makers, right? They were the main craftsmen that would create the images that shape people's sense of identity, sense of historical self. And that's at a very deep level, right? It's not like just giving people commands or orders or following rules. The images seep into the deep structures of our psyche. And so even if we we don't like certain things or whatnot, if we have certain narratives that we're not willing to challenge, certain illusions, it becomes a problem, right? And these illusions feel good or they feel right. And that's the thing about truth, right? Today in our society, truth is very much a thing of something feeling like it's true, right? If something feels like it's true, that's when people are really invested in it. People can intellectualize all sorts of stuff about good, bad, and evil, but at the end of the day, it's what's in their hearts and minds that's going to decide how they choose to respond in critical moments. And so that's why there's all these false dichotomies and these illusions of choice, right? But the choices that we have, that's the thing in hypnosis, for example, since you mentioned my articles on trance and transcendence. You give people an illusion of choice. Like a lot of stuff's kind of simple, right? You give people a false choice, and from there you shape the debate around that, and a thing takes a life of its own. So I feel that's less maybe sexy than the whole Hollywood, conspiracy, Clockwork Orange, like woo, they got your eyes strapped and they're
Yeah.
feeding you stuff. It's actually, it's the stuff that you like. It's the stuff that makes you feel good, that you don't question, that is really what allows that whole concentration camp of the mind, as Huxley called it in his famous Ultimate Revolution lecture at Berkeley, which is one of these big nodes that all sorts of things came out of it, still do. Some form of consent is required. And so you got to give people narratives and things that they can feel good about. And then people are, they become a bit stupid, right? Because they're emoting. And the one I like or that I find is very obvious, simple, but it's like the environmentalism stuff, right? We just want green grass, green trees, clean air. Everybody wants that, right? Those
Yeah.
feel good. Those feel right. The details of Agenda 21
Yeah.
or
Shut up.
Agenda 2030, that's very cerebral. That
Yeah,
doesn't,
we don't need that. Just
yeah,
blue skies with like a puppy running by. Don't
yeah,
talk
the
about
skies,
don't talk about boots on the ground, blue helmets, digital surveillance. Shut up.
no, exactly. And I mean, I guess the paradox is, because everything is very split between left and right, is that it's hard to shatter or, it's easy to poke holes in the illusions of others, but we all
Not
have
our
illusions.
not our own though. It's very
Yeah,
difficult.
there's all sorts of things that we like that make us feel good. And that's what we're always in different kinds of trances and emoting with different things. And that it's really an infantile way of or a way of infantilizing people where it's about reality is determined or understood in terms of the things that make us feel good that we like. Those are good. That's the good part of reality. And the things that we don't like that don't make us feel good, that we have a negative affectation towards, those are bad, right? And Plato called this the democratic man, right? In his hierarchy of different kinds of men in a society. And he said there's as many uh, kinds of states as there are kinds of men. So at the lowest level, there's the tyrant, then there's the Democrat, and then there's the oligarchs, the fake Democrats, the people that or you could say the oligarchs or the plutocrats, and then you have the fake Democrats, the people that feign honor and goodness, right? Like a lot, you see that on the right, all the quote unquote religious,
Yeah.
God fearing people.
God, Jesus, I'm out on my farm and but you deregulated like oil drilling in the Amazon basin. Shut up, commie. Like,
Yeah, it's so the democratic man is the thing that Plato was really identifying as the problem because it has to do with opinion, with the world of doxa, of orthodoxy. Orthodox means having the right opinion. And so I think the interesting thing is people can have right opinions, but if they're opinions, they're not really knowledge, right? Just because you have images that associate with positive affectations, positive feelings, and that they feel right, and maybe you have the right opinion on certain, let's say, economic policies or da da da. But if your worldview is determined based on what you feel is good and what you feel is bad, you're in trouble. And the problem is that that's what it came down to for Plato, that unless people could make the distinction between imitations of the real thing and the real thing, there's no society that could survive in the long run. And a lot of that happens at the level of culture, which, as we know, is as the adage goes, is down. Politics is downstream from culture. We just have to, if we zoom out and we look at what the cultural matrix of a society is, we don't see it from day to day, how
yeah,
these things affect us. But I find it's like if you look at the surface of the earth and you look at the rock formations and the seas and the whole geography, you don't see that being shaped by the wind and the rain from day to
yeah,
day. But there's nothing on the surface of the earth really that
that is
hasn't been
static. Yeah,
shaped and formed by that. So then there's the question of scale,
yeah,
of time. What time scale is our identity um, anchored in? And I just say one more thing. The interesting contrast is the thing about the bad guys, let's say the oligarchs, they think very long term, right? Like if you're raised and born and bred into an oligarchical family, you think in terms of big arcs.
generational
You think,
wealth.
yeah, you think in terms of many generations, 500 years, 300 years, then they'll say, yeah, no, my family goes back to whatever Babylon or Rome or da da da. And I mean, they bullshit just like everybody else, right?
Yeah, yeah,
But think about the difference in identity between somebody who's just, a quote unquote, the young folks today, they like the word normie, right? You're just a normie, kind of things you like, the music you like, the culture you like, and you got your work life and da-da. But you're not, your identity is pretty, it's really about the here and now, the day to day, maybe week to week, month to month. But it's not, this is the democratic man. It's about what makes you feel good and doing what you like and supporting that. But if you're a stoic oligarch who has more of a sense of, a vision of where things need to go, you think very differently about the long term, about the future. And that shapes qualitatively your behavior, your modus operandi at any moment. So I think identity is really a big one. What is our identity as individuals in this moment in history? And are we able to think in terms of as a as historical citizens and historical identities that act on not only the past but the future as well?
yeah. And then in terms of like a society not being able to differentiate from fake and real is, I think that's part of the like just the giant push for, flagging and censoring misinformation and disinformation. Like, first of all, tyrannical powers will always arise from, we're doing this for your own good. That's not a novel observation of mine. But there is Tim Dillon, the comedian, who I quote far.
Oh,
Do you like him? Do you like Tim
I
Dillon?
was quoting Tim Dillon at my presentation
Dude,
on
I
Sunday.
quote
Okay,
Tim
we're
Dillon like every episode, and people are like, "Who
okay.
is this
So
author, Tim Dillon?" I'm like, "He's a fat gay ex cocaine. Don't worry about it."
yeah,
But
that's
but
okay.
he's
Now we're
yeah, but he's a no. I love listening to the OG Gas Digital episodes, him and Ray Kump, and I love going back and listening to those. And
I
um,
cry by myself at night just of laughter. This
it,
is
he is.
literally every day. I listen every day, like a lot of the old episodes.
Oh,
I'm
dude,
back.
it's I will literally I will. We just became best friends. Everyone watching this is like, "Shut up! Keep talking about culture. Go fuck yourself." No. Um,
Yeah, no, go.
yeah,
Everybody needs to.
I'm listening to Pizza Hut Buffet right now. Archives 32. The
It's a great buffet.
I love the old ones with him. I love him before he gets rich, which again is not a novel observation. I love it
Yeah.
when it's him and Ray Kump and they're just fat and angry. And I think it's the best content.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, there's so much that we could say there, just in terms of calling out all the fakeness, right?
Sure. Sure. We could see how, but then it's like a weird thing because if I'm him, I don't actually want to stay in that. It's like, what's the value of not selling out? Like, I like the original Tim Dillon, where it's him and Ray Kump with a combined weight of 9,000 pounds, like just screaming in like a room, eating McDonald's, having the most complex discussions about counterintelligence, and then also just like disgusting pedophile jokes. And
Yeah.
then, and I like that Tim Dillon. And in order for that Tim Dillon to continue, he would never have the success of making $2 million a year on Patreon and going on Rogan twice a year.
Yeah.
So I might say he's a sellout, but really what I'm saying is no, it's just who does he sell out for? If he doesn't get rich, then he's selling out to me, the listener, to the tune of $2 million a year. So there is no not selling out. So ultimately it comes down to, well, then which one are you going to do? Well, subjectively, you're going to take the money and go buy a house in the fucking Hamptons. So like even that's like a deviation. But to the quote of him,
Yeah.
he goes, you need Alex Jones. He goes, not because Alex Jones is some, news anchor journalist. He's like, he's been right on some stuff. He's been wildly incorrect on others. He goes, but you need a society that can look at Alex Jones and say, oh yeah, no, he's just an entertainer. Or go, he was right on the Epstein thing. But when you have a society that can't even examine that because the government says it's misinformation, disinformation, you are no longer exercising that part of your brain that can look at what's real and what's bullshit. Like you have to be able to look in things. I love UFO conspiracies, but I don't take them hook, line, and sinker. 90% of them I look at and go, that's horseshit. You have to be able to
Yeah.
do that because in the larger context, you then also have to do that with real world events. Are the bad Russians really pushing us to World War III? Or are we? Or is Japan? I don't fucking, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
You get what I'm saying? Like, we have
Well,
to be able to exercise that.
yeah, and an interesting one that I just thought of in terms of the psyop stuff, and when we talk about the kind of trance um, ideas, like cognitive dissonance is a big thing, right? Like, what was the whole thing with Russia? Or we should put this way: I mean, generally speaking, people are wired on a primal level. People don't want any trouble. They don't want to get into trouble. They don't want things that threaten their livelihood, and so for something, what was the narrative, because they say conspiracy theories. Well, there's plenty of state sanctioned conspiracies, right? So it's not, the problem's not conspiracy theories, it's that certain conspiracy theories are sanctioned and others are not.
Yeah.
But like with the Russiagate, all you have to say, right, to if we're thinking in terms of behavioral science, which is what you got, like going back to the Obama administration, the behaviorists came in, the Cass Sunsteins and all these guys, and what they're looking at is really the from a numbers standpoint. If you have like 80%, 85% that believes a certain narrative, you kind of just zero in. You say, well, you'd say this narrative, let's say you question the Syria narrative. This narrative has been associated with Russian disinformation. Now, you're not calling the person a Russian disinformation agent, but you're saying that narrative, has been seen coming from Russian disinformation outlets.
Mm.
And that's a suggestion, right? But that's something people will feel on
Yeah.
on a deeper level, that like, okay, well, I probably shouldn't make a joke or talk about that, at the work meeting,
Because
you
I don't
know,
want to.
or
Yeah.
or among my friends, because it's going to polarize people, and some of them are going to get scared because you're talking about propaganda,
Yeah.
right? The suggestion is you're talking about propaganda, so that Russia intervened in the election. That's a conspiracy theory, right? By every by any estimation, but that one it was okay, right? Like you wouldn't get in trouble
Yeah.
if you signed on to
Sanctioned
that one.
sanctioned conspiracy. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a cognitive dissonance, right? It goes deep into people's tribal affinity, which I think is one of a lot of the behavioral science stuff. It's about tribes. It's about,
Sure.
like, you have the conservative tribe, you have the liberal tribe and whatnot, and it's easy to criticize the out group, right? Like that's all this politics stuff is, right? The out group is it's other, and anytime that there's like we're in an economic you could say decline, depression, whatever you want to call it, like things are observed by the behavioral scientists that anytime that there are economic or like strains, tension, geopolitical, whoever is regarded as not part of the in group in that society will be regarded uh, will be looked at as a potential aggressor, as a potential threat. And that's just wired in human beings, just an evolutionary mechanism that you got the in group and the out group. So, and a lot of people who have a lot of beliefs that could be very good people, or believe in, like, they say goodness, truth, and beauty, or they'll use Jesus and God and all these things, and then they'll criticize, well, the thing about the left is, well, those people,
Yeah.
let me tell you about,
Let me
and
tell
then
you
like,
about the libtards. And it's like
yeah, and
you're just brushing 160 million people into one group.
yeah, and then the whether it's the, like, back in the day when they were studying the psyop stuff, going back to the post-war period, you have a Dr. Sargent, William Sargent, right? And he went around profiling all the different primitive religious tribes across the world, like the voodoo rituals in Haiti, or the possession in Zaire, um, and the shamans, the magicians, the witch doctors, and the fundamentalist preachers. And so this is where you get into the hypnosis stuff, the trance, that people think about it in a very Hollywood caricature style. But you know, if I start getting you to think about the think the hellfire, like that you can
Hmm.
feel the flames, and like what's the preacher going to do, right? They're going to invoke they're going to use language, all that to say, to invoke certain emotional states of affectation, right? And they were looking at this in terms of trauma, shell shock in World War II, and that people who had been through traumatic things, even though they weren't living through these things anymore, they were reliving them. And you could elicit these different altered states, right? Where the person starts to break down, or like they disassociate. And so a lot of people are disassociated when it comes to politics and culture and their relationship to reality. And so they're in that state when you're kind of confused or whatnot. You're open to all sorts of new things. If there's a crisis, also
Yeah.
there's another crisis. So now that trauma pattern has been created. And so they were looking at, for example, and none of these things are bad in themselves, but like family therapy, group therapy, and you look at the dynamics of dysfunctional families and how everybody plays games. There's certain things you can say, certain things you can't, and oftentimes people are saying one thing, but they're really saying another. And so how do you frame messages in a way where you're saying one thing, right? You're framing it as, we need to protect the innocent children of Ukraine, right? Nobody should be uh, of scared of, where they're going to wake up tomorrow, or if they're going to have food, or da 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 da. We can't allow the Russians to keep shelling innocent people. And then come the new suggestions. That's an induction, right? Like, think of the regular person who's hearing these images. You're a mom, you have kids, right? And
Sure.
you're hearing that, regardless of all the geopolitical complexities, there's a feeling that this is bad, this is wrong, and it needs to stop. And so then it's a lot easier to introduce new suggestions because you've elicited that heightened emotional state. And so in therapy, or just standard therapy or whatnot, it's about, right, people will re-experience the trauma, but with the goal, right, with a good therapist, of then introducing new adaptive beliefs. So it's not like a bad or a good thing, but if you have a bunch of evil social engineers studying this and looking at how beliefs are changed and the role of groups and group dynamics, and creating the right conditions emotionally where now the new people become receptive to new ideas. That's what they studied with the tribes and possession, like a ritual voodoo possession where the person is really like, they're really into it, right? Because you got the drums, you got the music, you got the vibe. And so that alone will change your autonomic systems, right? The heartbeat changes.
Yeah, start to like
Um,
sync up. Yeah.
yeah, and you even I think of pop music, right? If we fast forward to pop music, what is it if not a trance state, right? Like, people will say, music gets me through the day. They're in their car and it's a good vibe, and you were feeling maybe crappy, or you don't feel like going to work, and you put it on and it changes your mood. It's not inherently bad, right? But what happens when you have a whole culture that becomes reliant on this kind of magic, as the magicians and social engineers would call it, where you create the rituals and the culture that allows people to magically alter their state, right? To tap into these different things. And so then people are just falling in and out of different, falling into one trance only to fall out of it and trip into another. And how much of our lives become inner directed and become about us on having a deeper level of awareness about ourselves, right? Our own imperfections, the imperfections of others, like our own illusions, the illusions of others, knowing that there is this thing called beauty, truth, and goodness, which each time we remove an illusion about ourselves, about others, the sacred cows, that we believed in, we come closer to the real thing. And I think that's inside each of us, like that everybody has an inner voice where they know, everybody knows what they're ultimately bullshitting about.
Yeah.
Right. Like, if you
Yeah.
if you really tap in, and if you kind of just, this is where the silence and, like, the prayer and meditation
Yeah.
comes in, which is really just about being in the moment. You're not being distracted. You don't have like a bunch of different thoughts. The question is it really just silence? If you're just there by yourself and you're going into a meditative, you could say, trance, where you're not being distracted. The question is there something already inside us? Are we just blank slates, or is there a soul? Is there a deeper inner voice and a deeper self that it's our duty to discover? Nobody can tell us what our deeper self is, right? And you do have that the importance of things like religion and culture and whatnot is you give people frameworks, you give people like every good practices, right? You could have all the good
Sure.
intentions in the world, but I mean, if you just eat McDonald's and smoke and you don't and you're sedentary, you could love Jesus as much as you want, but you're not really practicing the things that would allow you to get in touch with your deeper self, simply because you're constantly having your autonomic systems kick in, right? You're constantly, it's just one state of trance to another. The music, the work trance, when we're walking, we're in a trance. We don't think about every step we take. We think about maybe 1% of the steps we take. So that's a trance. And so much of life is in a trance where our autonomic systems, our automatic systems are doing the work for us. So how much of what we feel and what we believe is really ours and something that we came to ourselves. I guess that's a helpful and humbling thought. Like, we're all, whether our ideas are good or not, right? There's a history. Like, where do the ideas that we have come from? And I think this is where the question of the higher order of souls that Plato talks about, the actual timocrats who are there to defend justice and goodness, and the aristocrats, Aristo being excellence, right? So that, like, the Confucius calls them the yunzi, the superior men, right? They're educated, right? They're refined. They've done work on themselves. They don't just think in terms of pleasure and pain, what I can touch, taste, hear, see, or smell, and how these things sort of shape my life from day to day. But they're going deeper, right? About what is the nature of mankind, of the soul, that each of us, we each have a unique soul. And then you have the philosopher kings, which are responsible for creating new aristocratic and philosophical souls, right? New, developing that deeper thing inside each of us. And we all have a nobody can tell us, what that is. So all we can do is get good guides, look for the right guides, look for the good practices, right? Study the best minds, I think. And then we can experiment, right, with ourselves, right? We can do thought experiments. What if I did this? Or, what if I was that person? Or sometimes you see somebody or, like, there's people who have admirable talents, but they seem tragic for XYZ reason. Like, well, I don't, how do I not be tragic? Like, what is it? Why is this person who has so many great qualities yet have these things? And then, what are our good qualities, and how do we trick ourselves, fool ourselves, because we're after something that we want? But then it's like, is it the real thing? And does our deeper self not know? Like, if our deep, can we not, like, check in with ourselves and being like, well, why am I really, where did this idea come from? Like, where did this feeling that I feel this is the thing for me, where did that even come from? At the level of the democratic man, you don't go past that, right? You say, well, this is what I feel. This is what I like. And that's the danger, right? If you have a society, which is really what the social engineering is about, it's about these controlling the affective systems, right? The emotional responses that people have to the various images and things in society, and not talking about ideas, how narratives are actually constructed, what underlies our assumptions about the world, about capitalism versus communism, or conservatives versus liberals, but just feeling that, these are the things that we believe in, and these are our things. And that's how the magicians work. That's how the bad guys, are able to control people, because we live in a society that, where, the souls are in artificially, I'd say, people are primed to think in terms of what you feel and like, and to not go deeper and ask, like, what are the nature of these things? Where did they come from? Where did my ideas come from? That's It's a humbling thought. Like, it's a healthy thought, and we're less radical if we start thinking like that, because we don't want to sound like assholes or morons who are just like, well, let me tell you about da-da-da.
Yeah.
And it's easy to whip people up into it, to get them amped up, if you know what the affectations are, the positive, like, think of all the wars that we're fighting, the godless communists, right? We're firebombing women and children in Vietnam, but these are communists, right? Like, and they have nothing behind their eyes, they're just godless,
Yeah.
da-da-da. so-called good people that, have a healthy fear of God and, want to do the right thing, or, uh, their support evil, like real evil, not because they're bad people, but because they're operating at the level of the democratic soul. And whatever tribe you're in, there's that matrix of images and affectations, those the affective systems. And the bad guys will just, they don't really care, right? They believe in power. They believe in shaping opinion. And so that's the science, right? That's what behavioral science is all about. How do we frame this so that people feel a positive thing about how we're spinning it, and they don't really think about the other side of it, you know?
So much of like all the horse shit in life can be solved by 20 to 30 minutes of silence a day. Just I've been meditating every day since 2008.
Okay.
That
Yeah.
has done more for me than any audiobook. That has done more for me than 4 years of private high school and 4 years of college. That has done more for me than 150 history books. It's just going, and it's the most counterintuitive thing because it's at first it's like the appeal to authority. It's like, well, who are you getting it from? It's like, no, it is the ultimate truth. You just go inside. Well, what meditative practice? That's all bullshit too, because that's still just someone else telling you something and you have no idea who's throwing it at you. The
Right.
only absolute truth is not a thought about what's going on. It is just the subjective experience. Don't put words on things. Don't say today's Tuesday and I'm sitting in a chair. Just as you just strip away layers of I'm not in a country, I'm on a planet, or I'm not anywhere, I'm just here. And then don't even say here because that implies there. Just as you just strip away all the structures, and it finally comes down to I am, and you really can't differentiate much further from that. And that might sound like nihilistic or, well, what do you believe from there? But
Mhm.
no, it's a wellspring of joy. You go, oh, I am, and it's the most pure. No one needs to tell it to you. It is, you know, if you lived 100,000 years ago, you might not have a word for it in equation, but you know what gravity is. You're like, don't go near the cliff. You're fucking dead if you go over that cliff. You know what it is. You don't need anyone to tell you you're conscious because your mirror neurons are pushing glutamate and all the just
Well, the irony is that, I mean, number one, I think, yeah, when we're talking about the truth, right? Because people always get amped up, and I mean, it's for also, what do you mean by the truth? Right?
oh, yeah.
And some people will go like more hardcore, just stick to the dogma, stick to the safe stuff. And I mean, that's understandable, and there's a place for that, and we can see when people totally just throw everything out. If they're not on the higher scale of, the democratic and aristocratic and philosophical souls who are not really looking at everything in terms of their self-interest. It's not really a thing. But, when you hear the tribalism and the stuff that people think, or like a lot of people that do crooked stuff, right? Like what they believe is ultimately stuff that aligns with their self-interest. Surprise, right? Like it's like, is it really what you believe, or no? So that's more of the democratic or plutocratic mindset. There's no higher truth to ascertain or to love or to pursue. But I'd say the irony is when we're in that humble state of silence, prayerful meditation, whatever we want to call it, the truth finds us, right? Because the assumptions start to fade away, right? It's the assumptions that we have that are kind of in the way. Um, I mean, there's a fun quote by Lao Tzu. If you want knowledge, add things every day. If you want wisdom, remove things every day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now the question is there something already? Because if there's something already there, then is the problem really that we don't have enough of something, or is that
It's
there's a lot of noise and a lot of different things that are preventing us from
Aldous
getting in touch
Huxley,
with
the
that
mind
deep?
at large, right? Aldous Huxley, where he's the mind at large. The brain is actually like a very tiny faucet at the bottom of a huge barrel of consciousness, and it's just limiting how much you can get. And it's not that you need to add more. It's you just got to break off the faucet and just have nothing. And it is if consciousness is like a glass jar full of water in the middle of the ocean, just
Yeah.
break the
And
jar.
I'd say at the same time, so yeah, like what happens when we let that thing happen on its own, right? Like that we don't try to control it. Right. I think that's where wisdom starts. At least we can get intimations of wisdom. Like what
Mhm.
happens when we let that thing happen on its
Just let it
own?
flow.
Because it clearly it's not nothing, right? Which is the other thing. Like, oh well, you're just kind of like making yourself like an empty vessel.
Mhm.
Well, are humans blank slates? Right. That's really what. Or is there something already there? And this goes back to, you've I mean you've spoken with Matt on your podcast several times and all that. I believe. Um, and so, yeah, like as well, we always talk about this going back to the battle. When we're talking about education and a classical education, as opposed to just social engineering, where it's about all the affective systems and the affectations and just shaping how people feel towards different things. The classical education system, going back to Plato, he talks about the immortality of the soul, with the idea being that there's something already there. Whereas Aristotle makes the point that we're a tabula rasa, we're a blank slate, we're and we have impressions, and these impressions create phantasma in our mind, images, but there's nothing, he says, that isn't um, mixed in with senses, with sensory perception. So being that we're really only just blank slates that are being colored on by our impressions of the world, but there's no deeper immaterial and immortal soul that is something that each individual uniquely has. And I mean, the catch is that Plato makes the point that this is where ideas come from, which are also mysterious, right? And I think we talk
Yeah.
about truth, and then people today think like mathematical formalism, like a perfect formula. But the simple truth is that there are these deeper mysteries, right? That every individual does have a soul, which isn't something that we can dictate to them. It's not. It's not created by us. It's not. And we have minds and we have ideas and new ideas. How do new ideas happen? The way ideas are really talked about, like the languages, an idea occurred to us. Something found us, right? Or the muses. If we're talking about art and poetic composition, that Plato was also big on talking about, they had the idea of the muses because the idea is there's something finding you. And can we be humble enough to let these inspirations find us? Great art finds us. Nobody. Shelley said it in one of his famous essay, the defense of poetry. Even like the greatest poet can't just like sit down and like I'm gonna write the best shit I ever
Well,
wrote. That's not how it works,
Maya
right?
Angelou said, you can write for days on end. You got to show up every day to the typewriter. And sometimes all you write is the fat cat in the hat sat on the mat. And it's just awful. And then one day, as if appreciative of your consistency, the muse says, all right, all right. And it gives you the great novel.
Yeah, and if it's coming from the right place, right? Because
Yeah.
if we have the democratic soul or the timocratic soul, let's say, the fake ones, they'll they'll learn skills, right? They'll master, they have talents. That's the other thing, right? Good guys, bad guys, everybody can have talent. Everybody
Sure.
has talents. There's another mystery, right? Like we don't technically choose our talents. Uh, in the Bible at one point, what do you have that you haven't been given? There's a story about each person is being paid a sum for their work in the field, but they're showing up at different times in the day, and but each person agreed to like this fixed amount. But then at the end of the day, one guy shows up at 9 a.m. or 7 a.m., one at 9 a.m., one at 3 p.m., and one at like 5. and the person who shows up at 5 and only works like 2 hours gets the same payment as the person who's been working since 9 a.m. And so he goes to complain, hey, like, what's the story here? And the reply was, what do you have that you haven't been given? And I think even our greatest talents, right? Even the greatest genius, because you're talking about Tim Dillon and all these talented people, like real talent. Um, I think they lose because you're complaining about the richer version of Tim Dillon. They lose that because they get the image of themselves changes, right?
Mm.
And as the image of themselves changes, and they don't feel like they need to hustle or stuff anymore, um, that has a pretty strong effect on the psyche. Like
Yeah.
you're not worried about like the financial stuff. It doesn't really survival. All these things are not a thing anymore. And I was just thinking like, think about somebody who works somewhere and makes 60,000, and then one of the like managers makes like 90,000. How much higher, as in terms of esteem and uh you know thoughts about themselves, how more distant are they from the person who makes 60,000? It's only $30,000 difference, right? But how does it change their sense of identity and their feeling of superiority over the for regular folks? It has a big effect, right? If somebody makes 60,000, the other person makes 100,000, wow, that person's like really a lot better.
Mm.
And da-da-da-da. And then you think of oligarchs, right? Well, it's like infinity,
They're making, yeah,
in
they've
terms
got
of
billions. They must be gods.
they don't yeah, like it's not a thing. You're in a different phase space. And so you don't think the same way. You don't have the same identity, and you don't think on the same time scale. So that can affect anybody. You can be really good, you can be really talented, but like I like that's why humility is an important idea, right? And it what do we have that we haven't been given? All the more we should be in awe of whatever gifts we do have, or whatever things. Yeah, we worked for it, but it's like, well, had you not worked to develop your talents, like that's not an impressive thing. So like, good, you developed your talents, but then again, what are you going to do with it? And that's where I think the craft stuff, like some people they have talents and they use them to kind of get ahead, you know and once they make it, then they kind of know their craft and what to do to make something like a movie or whatnot. But it's not the same, right? As you said, like the earlier Tim Dillon, um there's something that's lost, something subjective. And so I think the way to really tap into that deeper creative fount, which is really the source of the muses and all that, and so that it doesn't die. It's not something that you experience and then things change, your world changes, and then you change, and then you forget where these things really came from in the first place. And so you're still going through the motions and you're doing things, but it's not coming from the same place. And so, I mean, these are also, I'd say, we're talking about talking about transcendence as well, right?
Hmm.
Because there's trance, which is these momentary, uh, you know, vacations or whatnot, we could say, like just tapping out, and it's normal, right? We're tired or we had a long day, and you just want to chill and tap out,
Yeah.
disassociate, whatever it is, right? People
Yeah.
want to do. Transcendence, on the other hand, is closer to staying there in that moment, right? And not trying to push down, like in the Brave New World, not trying to push down all the other stuff, right? But really letting it kind of go through us,
Yeah.
you know, whether it's even if it's like feels like an 18-wheeler, right? All the things that we just really don't feel like dealing with. But what happens when you make it to the other side, right? Where you haven't broken off, you haven't disassociated, you haven't, uh, taken some form of magic or found some form of magic that just makes it all go away, at least for now. Um, yeah, what happens when we make it to the other side? And I think that becomes a healthier way to think about all the evil, and the Brave New World stuff, because it's really just preventing us from doing that, right? And it's creating the idea that we just need all these distractions and all these whatever it is we like, right? And we build up our own reality, right? That's the whole point of the Brave New World, is a concentration camp with no tears where people love their servitude.
Yeah.
You create your own concentration camp, right? And the people on the left have a different idea of their own Brave New World servitude that they love versus the people on the right, or whatever the tribe. But the idea still holds, that people are in our society given all the tools, right? That's really that's the catch. There's just so much choice. There's just so many things, right? Like you'll never run out, but the magic always fades, right? Like the trance always fades, and we never develop the ability to handle the off-road terrain of our souls, right? Where it's not automatic. They're not just schemas in our heads and things we've learned or images from the past that we're still, responding to, or practices. Some are good, some are bad, right? But they're just all guardrails and they're schemas. And so how much freedom is there in that when faced with the real world, this dynamic, the real world, the real thing, which is not a schema.
To quote the philosopher king Tim Dillon, saying looking at things through the lens of left or right is simply the shirking of the burden of independent thought. I don't need to know, oh, that guy's associated with white supremacy. I don't need to, it's like when those people would go out on the street and they'll go to somebody voting for Trump and tell them Biden's tax plan, but they'll say it's Trump's and they agree with it. Or you find someone voting for Biden, you can tell them Trump's foreign policy, but tell them it's Biden's and they agree with it. And then you're like, that's actually this other, like 1% of them will be like, oh, holy shit. Most people, they just kind of do the whole, they just walk away. And it's like, no, the shirking of the burden of independent thought, the off-road terrain. Like I got into medical school out of college. That was difficult, but it was also easy because it was difficult in that you had to get A's in classes. It was easy in that you just had to take these classes for 8 semesters and get this grade, and then you get in. Building
Right.
a podcast is far more difficult than getting into medical school in that there's no guardrails. Well, what do I do? I don't know. Turn on a camera. Well, how do I record it? I don't know. Google it. Well, how do I get guests? Fuck if I know. I got to go to work. Go talk to somebody.
Yeah.
And it's difficult, but the reward is far greater than staying on the smooth paved highway. It's the off road of the mind.
Yeah. And at the same time, I think this is where the other, know thyself,
Yeah.
right? Like people are different. There's different temperaments. Different people have different appetites for risk or creativity, like how they think about it. And that's totally normal, right? Because you do need people that are just, they like a routine
They
and
just do, yeah.
they like, you need that, right? Like if
Well,
people
yeah.
were all on like the other end of the spectrum, like nothing would work.
Well, those are the people that all listen to my podcast.
Yeah,
they're all, I'm putting them in a trance. I need my trance people.
Nobody's gonna show up, or like, well, I
Yeah.
wasn't feeling it. It wasn't in my heart. Well,
Yeah.
like it's, so, but obviously,
Yeah, you're right. You can't have people not showing up to the SpaceX rocket manufacturing because they weren't touched by the muse today. Yeah, you got to be
yeah.
scared shitless. You're going to lose your dental care.
But the irony is that the people who do that, I mean, ideally, and I mean, in a healthy world, I think that's where people are having their skills developed to their utmost potential and they're pursuing their natural talents. There are people who like that. They like the analytical sort of crunching everything and making everything work and problem solving. These like very objective, using these very objective criteria that something has to happen. It has to happen like this, and we need to do the things to make it happen. That's still creativity, right? But they use a lot of formulas and there's a lot of procedures and there's a lot of rules. Some people are more on the other side, right? They kind of like to come up with the stuff themselves and to kind of figure it out or see what finds them, right? I think with the art stuff, it's got to be what finds you. It's much more subjective. You kind of got to go with what's in your heart, right? Assuming that you've developed yourself such that there's, the things in your heart, can have talent, but what if you have evil in your heart? You know, there's also talent is not just a thing for good people, right? Aldous Huxley was a skilled writer. I wouldn't say he was a great writer, and he was kind of, you know, he was kind of imitating Shakespeare with his Brave New World. Like, it was very much the theme of Shakespeare's last one of his last plays, The Tempest, which is like storm. They find themselves on an island. Things are completely different, and it's like a blank slate in the sense that it's like it's a new world to then build something. And
Mhm.
so Huxley takes that Shakespearean world, which is much more complex, and he just reduces it to, you know, eugenics, sex cults, soma culture.
Doma. Yeah.
And it's a soma culture is like the centerpiece of the thing, and there's the controlled breeding, and there's all these things, but he's just that's just the evil sort of social engineering eugenicist outlook, but keying off a theme from Shakespeare essentially. And I mean, because that's the word the title Brave New World is a line from that play, so it's not out of nowhere. And so these guys, these H.G. Wells, these Huxleys, you know, a lot of these people that are had quite had talent, you know, were very skilled, but they used it to then, you know, create uh, uh, dystopian, you know, visions of things, as opposed to dedicating themselves to goodness, truth, and beauty. But yeah, what finds us and what we do with it, it's also what's in our hearts, what's in our minds, and have we, you know, uh, gone checked in with ourselves and like see what's really um, motivating us. And if we do that, then it's easier to know other people too, right? Like,
Sure.
that's the catch, because we could say whatever, da, 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 but there's all these things going on in the world. But it's like, yeah, but all the other people you're dealing with are people who have either not done that or done that.
Yeah.
And so shouldn't you know like who, where, who, and what is at? You know, shouldn't you know where these people are at? Because if we're talking about organizing people and ideas, and you know, defending good ideas, and generating new ideas and solving problems that don't yet have solutions, uh, we got to have people who are able to navigate the off-road terrains. And there's no rule book, right? There's no formula here, read this.
Nope.
That ain't it. As
There
Tim
ain't
Dillon would say,
ain't
that's
no
not.
yeah. It ain't great. No, yeah, no, it's you go to Mars. Well, what guidebook do we use? I don't know. Fuck
Yeah.
around, see what happens. Thought that guy tripped and broke his spacesuit and suffocated. All right, everybody, don't go near those rocks. Those are sharp. Noted.
Right. And to
We're,
say, the irony is you do have to fuck around in experiments, right? In thought experiments, which
that's the
requires a lot of creativity. And at the same time, so it's not one or the other, right? It's really that you have the creative, you know, we have to develop these faculties such that then they can be applied seriously to the universe,
yeah.
like the real universe.
They're like the tangible
That's like
material.
welcome to the world, right? Like, wait, so ideas which are immaterial, which things we have to kind of get inspired about and think about and come up with things and have a vision, right? Because people can be great engineers, but if nobody has a vision of, you know, mankind is not just being like a beast, right? A pleasure seeking beast, and like the whole Adam Smith free trade kind of British Empire world of like it's just a world of regulating the vice and the desires and the appetites of people, and you know, running the finance and da da da. Like, you're not going to get Mars, you're not going to get a spacefaring species if people don't have a sense of identity that thinks generations into the future, right? So it's technically a very practical idea for people who like, oh, well, that's not practical, you know, like visions and da da da. Like, you know, some people, the engineering mind tends to be more concrete and about like objectivity, but then where there is no vision, the people perish, right? Like, mankind has changed because at the higher level, there are people who are allowing themselves to allowing the creativity to sort of guide them, and the truth to guide them, and to just be ready and willing for whatever finds them, and to follow it. And then there's all the different things that need to come together to make that vision real. But it's a whole, so there's no shortage of like things that are of no reason to not get our shit together when there's so many people who aren't comfortable with the off-road, navigating the off-road terrain. And there's such a Soma industry, a Soma culture that gets a lot of good people, right? It pulls in a lot of folks because the world is ugly, right? So then you think, well, hey, if shit is like this, I'm just going to get my own, I'm just going to worry about my stuff.
Yeah.
But is that freedom? Right? That's where that person needs to think about, like, what's really making you do that?
I think ultimately it is freedom in the same sense of the shirking the burden of independent thought. You have to have all these things available. And some people will tap out and go, this world's too bad. I'm going to order my Domino's. I'm going to rip this bong. I'm going to jerk off, play some Call of Duty, and go to bed. And that's fine. And then there are going to be some people that, like, this world sucks. I'm going to change it. And that is a form of natural selection. So, like, I think it all has to, a society has to have Alex Jones. Some people are going to look at it and go, Hillary Clinton is a lizard. Hey, man, those people were going to get taken for a ride one way or another. Other people are going to look at it and differentiate. So, like, you could be a billionaire and go, I'm not going to do anything. I'm tapping out. I got my hookers, my penthouse, my Coke, whatever. Or you can go, like, fuck this gay earth. Like, we're going to Mars. Right. And I think you have to have, now, personally, is it freedom? No, you are personally submitting yourself to a mental jail cell, but you chose to do that. And
yeah,
I think
and
anyone can make that choice but yourself.
You're right, but there is also levels of awareness, right? Like they chose certain things, or they believe they were choosing certain things, but then it's like, yeah, because we all have these images, right? So the CO, like you said, the hooker, CO, drugs and whatnot. And yeah, so there's a lot of magic, right? If you got a lot of cash money and resources, right?
You
like
can
you've
make
done well
happen, yeah.
in the the animal kingdom of acquiring wealth and yeah, so the magic is pretty abundant, such that there are certain things you won't notice, right, as easily. And I think that's the thing, right? If you think of Hollywood and celebrities and like there's a lot, you have a lot more resources, so it's much easier to run out of the magic because you just get something new. You got money, so the fact that you're getting older, you can compensate in all sorts of different ways. But there's an interesting, I was thinking about, I talked about this in one of the previous presentations I did for the Rising Tides. And I was listening to a lecture by Huxley, and he talked about like the psyche in the pre-classical Greek times, let's say, or just for the Greeks, the psyche was something that people only experienced at death, at the end of their life. That's when the psyche, their mind of sorts would leave them, and so that's when they would know it. And there's all sorts of stories you'll always hear of people on their deathbed, and all of a sudden, like, they just become kind of honest, and they lay down their armor, they confess whatever, or they share whatever, or they're just honest about, like, I wish I would have this, or I wish things would have been like that. So the way I think about it is, number one, I don't want to be that guy who invested all this time and energy into procuring all these, fun and elegant forms of magic,
trophies,
only to have the thing. You ain't gonna escape the thing at the end. So whatever it is you're trying to avoid, or you think like, are things that everything is okay as long as you can like block out certain things. That's not really how it works.
Not the final one.
According to many accounts and to history, the truth is gonna it's a real thing. And so the psyche, it's just going to come to you at the end, and it's going to hurt even more,
Hmm.
right? If you're just the hooker, CEO, coach, and some, sure, there's psychopaths, and maybe they won't,
Yeah,
their
they don't
brains
give a shit.
damage or stuff. Yeah,
There's
no,
like
sure,
what
there's
they're so,
shitty people.
they're so
They're not
cocky.
our,
They're like, I'll fuck the Grim Reaper up. I don't give a shit. I'll
yeah,
buy
well,
him out.
yeah.
And it's like, you're insane.
And well, as Tim Dillon would say, we wish them well,
We wish
right?
him well.
But
We wish him well. Yeah.
God love them. We wish them well. But that ain't it for most people, right? And so then do people want to take that chance where the psyche is, it's still there, you know? So whatever illusions we've built our lives around, and some people get lucky maybe, and it doesn't get challenged. But again, I don't want to be that guy
I
who
don't want to
says,
roll
"Oh,
those dice.
I don't feel like my luck is that great that like, oh, I'm gonna be one of the lucky ones." I don't feel that's a
I'm
good.
a 5'9" white Irish guy. I have not rolled the dice that well so far. I'm not gambling on the big one.
Yeah, I'm not. I don't like to gamble on these things.
Yeah.
So you know, it's like that's hence the more humble and sort of just take our time and you know, not be in a life race where we're sort of keying off of all the narratives and schemas that are already set up for us, um, but trying to let the real thing find us.
Yeah.
And every time we do that, and then it becomes easier to like and appreciate other people because you can see deeper into them, right? That there's something behind even like that they don't see. Tim
Yeah.
Dillon said this actually. I always like this. Um, you can see you can see it in somebody's eyes when like they don't really know who they are, and what have they been doing? They've just been keying off of all these different automatic motivations, these schemas, and just been falling in and out of illusions. You know, just going with the flow. Um,
But
but you know that's rough, right? And if when it doesn't work out or like something serious happens, and the real world comes crashing in, that's I don't know that I want to be that person. You know, no matter how well things were going before or that things look good, I don't know. I get paranoid. You know, like I don't want to be that guy. I don't.
he's talking about Dennis and like life in the big city. And he's like, so let me wrap this all up. And he goes, you're not going to stop the military industrial complex. You're never going to find true happiness. What you can do is fill up a Burger King cup with ice and red wine and smoke cigarettes inside and walk around the house saying life in the big city and build your own bubble of delusion. And if anyone tries to awake you from that slumber, kill them. He's just
Yeah,
trying to like
that's
build your own bubble and just go. And that's like that's very funny and everything, but like eventually the bubble does get popped.
well, that's the thing, right? The idea that the Burger King ice and cups and stuff like that, the idea that that's going to work in the long run is a pretty tenuous
Yeah.
idea. And so that's hence, you know, like what hence the importance of, you know, whatever it is we like or whatnot, like the real thing versus imitations of the real thing. And this is really, I'd say, the legacy of evil is the legacy of imitations, of giving people things that feel like the truth, that seem like the truth, that feel good, that seem like they're good, or that seem beautiful, at least outwardly, right? But that when you really get into it, you find that there's something very different than the spectacle that has been created, the images that have been created, and the people who and you see the people who learn that way, that that's really how they were brought up. And so they just got good at curating images of themselves, of creating a bubble for themselves. But you know, if we know that that's kind of fake and it's you know raw, there's all sorts of things that could go wrong. If we look at our society, I mean, what are you saying? There's not or if we look at our society, that's the Brave New World. And so it's not made up of a bunch of bad people, but it's people that have been sold, you know, various forms of magic, been fallen in love with various kinds of imitations and illusions. And so they can't distinguish that from the real thing anymore. And that's what's kind of scary, right? Because it's one thing to like know, like, yeah, I know cigarettes are bad, whatnot. But it's another thing to be like, well, no, cigarettes are good,
Yeah.
And to believe that all the shitty things that you believe they're good, like that's another level of delusion. In that, it's one thing to lie to others. I was thinking, I was writing about something, and people will lie to others, but what's worse than lying to others is lying to yourself. That, like, you believe the bullshit that you sort of hawk, as Tim Dillon would say.
Yeah.
Like, that's worse. Don't lie to yourself, because if you're not lying to yourself, at least there's a chance to kind of get in there and deal with things, and get in that off-road terrain and see the things that find you. Right, the magic that finds you is often, it's not what we think. Like, we don't know what will look like what will become, what the world will be, until we make it on the other side. And this is Dante's comedy. He goes into hell, and he looks at all the ugliness, and he meets all the ugly souls, right? Who, in one way or another, had given themselves to XYZ, imitation, vice, sin, whatever you want to call it. And he sees what it is, and the kind of characters that you get, because they've gone, these are people that went all the way, in a sense. They didn't become humble later on, or at some point, and like press the brakes and be like, well, let me think about this. They just kept going and going. And so then he goes to purgatory, right, which is an uphill climb, that gets easier the higher you climb, right? So the more you climb, the easier it gets. And then he has to go through the wall of fire, purgation, to cleanse himself of, I believe the sin was lust at that point. Like, that was the last one that he had to just totally uproot, right? Because the saints, it's all about, you got to one thing at a time. Things are all deeply rooted. And so then he makes it through to the other side, right? The fire looks like it's going to burn him, looks like he's going to just, disintegrate but he puts his hand through, and it's totally fine. And then when he makes it through to the other side, it's a different world. And I mean, I think that's in the kind of world that we're in right now. It's the question is, it's all about making it to the other side. We know how ugly things can get, right? We can see the ugliness outside, but that can often be a reflection, or remind us of some of the ugliness inside of ourselves, right? But we can get excited knowing that there's something else. Like, what happens when, we do sort of just follow that deeper calling, those deeper whisperings inside ourselves that are calling our bullshit. And if we're just always there, like we're always present for that, and that becomes our natural state, as opposed to the external voices and things that will come and sort of, tell us what to do, or point us in, the approved direction.
Yeah.
It's kind of exciting, right? Compared to
No,
the
it's very
boring,
exciting. It's very
compared
optimistic.
to the other stuff, it feels more exciting than the magic that ain't gonna last.
That's the other thing. I think that's kind of what's like shifted my viewpoint is like in April 2021, I was able to move just so so I got into medical school in 2013, decided not to go, lost a brother to suicide in 2014. I got really depressed for a couple years doing a lot of drugs, moved home to my parents' house in 2016, was there for like 5 years, and was just as like this, it really was like a purgatory. I just kept it was like Sisyphus. I just kept like building things, and then I would just fuck up and building things for like 5 years. And anyway, so I finally moved out in April 2021. Like the podcast made it able to do so. And like, yeah, like my first weekends by myself, it was just like all the pleasure, like ordering pizza, gonna get fucked up. And like, it was fun. But after like, a couple weekends of it or a couple months of it, it's just like, yeah, man, like I'm gonna have to deal with the hangover. I'm gonna have to go to the gym and like diet off all these like breadsticks. Like the magic
Yeah.
stops being as fun. And you go through that. And instead of being like, I have to resist all the pleasures, instead you're like, no, I had them and like they're all right. But I kind of want
Yeah,
to.
and no one's saying no one's saying don't have a cookie either, right? Like
Oh
that's where
yeah, sure.
people get
That's
the other
we're
extreme.
also conscious
And
beings. Like sometimes just eat a Reese's cup. Fuck off. There's nothing
yeah,
deeper
yeah,
than it. It's just a Reese's cup.
have a burger, as
Yeah.
Tim Dillon would
Yeah,
say,
yeah,
but
yeah. Have a
doesn't mean, yeah, like don't, let's not, other, that's the problem. Then people, because they see things that they don't like, they hate certain, they see how bad society has gotten, and so they
they go
attribute certain
completely the
things.
other direction of like asceticism, like no pleasure, no. And it's like, well, no, now you're just, as Ramdas would say, now you're just a horny celibate. Like you're not any more
Yeah,
evolved.
and
Now you're just horny and hungry.
yeah, and they just, well, the way I was thinking about it is there's a part of themselves that they hate.
Yeah.
And rather than actually making it through the other side and attaining that deeper level of transcendence, right, where all the things do come together, and we're not pushing shit down, it's just another version of pushing shit down,
Yeah.
right? Like they'll say, well, and it's demons and angels battling, and you got this whole duality thing that's going, like it's hardcore. But the fact is that there's parts of themselves that they hate, and they're just kind of, they're a divided self, which is, and there was a book, R.D. Lang, and I gave a presentation on this, for Rising Tide not long ago, and the criticism of like the traditional, sort of culture, there's good traditions and bad, but it was that everybody was kind of, there's these divided selves. We have the well-adjusted individual, so you say the right things, you go to church, you do things a certain way, you have the right beliefs, but then these people are all very ill, like they're super sick, and the families are super dysfunctional. So there's two different worlds warring, and there's a out loud part, but there's a quiet part, and people are just sick as hell. So that ain't it either, right? To just engage into this kind of like, you know, you're just so, people just hate certain parts of themselves or certain things, but they don't know how to, how did the things in your heart change such that you like beauty, truth, and goodness, right, as something that you feel in the same way that people, the imitations might make them feel good. The point of the transformation is that, well, people should love beauty, truth, and goodness, right? To be a philosopher is to love wisdom, and so that whenever you find something that corrects your previous assumptions, you're happy, you're excited, because you actually know you're getting closer to the real thing, right? You're removing an illusion or assumption that you had about yourself or about somebody or about an idea, and you're becoming more free, right?
Yeah.
You're less weighed down by things because you don't have to now feel like you need to pay homage to this or that sacred cow.
And
Even
then
if that sacred cow is associated with like your tribe, right? Your
yeah.
family. This
Yeah.
stuff drives people, it gets everybody, right?
Yeah.
And especially in our society, like, no, I doubt anybody's come out of it, perfectly fine. But uh, hence the power and the importance of going to that deeper self.
But even the duality is like part of the path. Like first you have to like fall for all the trances. You have to like eat the food, sleep in, drink the beer, smoke the pot on a Tuesday, skip class. You do all that and then you go into like the ascetic like phase of life, which for me was like 3 or 4 years of like no drinking, no smoking, no
Yeah,
hookups. It was like study, meditation, cold showers. And you do that
yeah.
for a
I love
while.
cold showers. I
They
love
are
cold
good.
showers.
They are good. But you move from that and then you can start to move to this like duality thing where it's like, yeah, like how do you like resist porn? Don't go cold turkey. Enjoy it every once in a while. Catch yourself when you use it too much. And now when you see it, you're not like, I don't really care. Like, how do you resist pizza?
And
Eat it every once in a while and go, that was good. But now it doesn't have power over me. When you see it, you're like, I haven't had pizza in 9,402 days. It's like, no, you just go, no, today's not my cheat day.
yeah, and into an increasing degree, right? For all these things, like, there's a more adaptive way to do to get there's a more adaptive way to get the thing that we're really looking for,
Yeah.
right? Because at the end of the day, the question is, what are we looking for all these things? I remember once, I was having a conversation. Uh, it was with friends, and yeah, Matt was saying, his mother mentioned there was a preacher. I had said something similar. And then he mentioned his mom saying how she sent him a sermon by a preacher who made the point that the guy in the brothel, he's not looking for sex. He said he's looking for God. Now, what does that mean? But there's all sorts of questions one could ask, like why is he in a brothel? Like what is the whole scheme of his life such that he's ended up at that brothel, and what are the things that he's been really looking for, and how has he been trying to get them, and such that life is a certain way. People are trying to alter their states to regulate their emotions, not just alter, right? We want the right affectation. We want to feel good. We want to feel happy and fulfilled. And there's all sorts of different ways that we can do things that seem to tide us over, right? So, like, yeah, there's no, again, that's why we don't want to go crazy with the duality, hardcore shaming stuff, because that's just people hating parts of themselves
Mm-hmm.
rather than lovingly finding ways to get in there, to go deeper, and to be like, well, what am I really looking for, and what would be the best way to get this thing that I'm looking for. And there's models, there are examples, right? There are good without needing sacred cows,
Yeah.
right? Like there are good practices and things that, again, our inner voice can tell us, like, is this the best way to do it, or is there another way? And I think sometimes we just get tired, right? We're like, well, this is gonna have to work for now, right?
Yeah.
So we understand that, right? But I guess it's always to be present, right? I'm sure you understand, like what you were saying with meditation, like to just still come back and see where we're at. What is it that we're really trying to get? And it's very humbling, right? When we're humble like that, it's like things will find us. We don't have to have the answers. I think that's the beautiful part. The answers will find us, and we screw it up by trying to always have the answer to everything rather than being humble and letting the universe, some people call it God, right? Like you could put many different names on it, but let that higher power uh kind of, just like the muses, just like poetry, as somebody who writes poetry and likes, publishes, has a, I publish poetry and stuff. It's about, the poetry has to find you. So it's like that with love. Love has to find you, right? I'm gonna go fall in love today.
Yeah.
Like that's not a thing.
I gotta run and go find my soulmate. Yeah. I saw.
There's people who do that, right? Like
No,
that's a
no.
thing,
Yeah. No. I've
and it's
spent many
normal.
years
I
doing
mean,
it, and like,
we
and then you're
understand
finding.
it, right?
Yeah. There's a simplistic quote, and it goes, "Love is a lot like farting. Either let it happen naturally. If you let it happen naturally, because if you force it, it'll be shit." And like I know that's kind of like a slapsticky 3-year-old joke,
Yeah,
but there is
yeah.
some truth to it.
Point taken. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's, yeah, the forcing stuff there. That's not, you don't get great art from that. You don't get good people, right? A society of anally retentive, ascetics is not really much better than, who probably want to burn anybody who's, they want to burn the sinners who are going to corrupt them. That's not really much better than, the book burning,
Like the yeah, or like the
organ.
decadent like dopamine seek. That's no different. It's just the other side of the coin.
Yeah, it's just a different form of, it's a different imitation,
A
different
different
form of,
trans.
yeah, but it's still evil.
Yeah.
If we let these things take over, like, then you get real evil.
I think we gotta wrap this one up. I'll email you after this. I'd love to have you on again sometime, man. That was a fucking brilliant talk. But if I could boil this all down, my advice would be to sit for 20 minutes a day in silence. And it'll build up over weeks and months and years. And you will find your truth. You will, you, the listener, you will find your truth. It's going to be yours and yours alone. And it's just going to be a long process. But I love that imagery of purgatory being the hill where the gradient just gets easier and easier. That's exactly what years of meditation is it gets easier and easier to walk through the pain and to go, Now when you see some, I've been meditating for 15 years now. It's like instead of pushing something away, I still push things away, but now it's I see something and I'm like, nope, I gotta approach this. I have to go have a difficult conversation because if I don't, I'm just gonna have to tomorrow. And you're just chipping away more and more of the layers, and it gets easier and easier and easier, which is great. It's like an addiction in reverse. Like it's
Yeah,
actually it becomes a better and better friend.
you just become more obsessed about just being there in the
Yeah,
moment and letting things happen. And that's where
yeah,
the magic, I think,
yeah.
is.
That's the liberation. And also, like you said about just having a cookie, it's also okay to just, the trances are really every day. I turn on my Tim Dillon trance, literally every day. I listen to Tim Dillon. He's my trance. It's after
There's
a
yeah,
long,
exactly.
I-
There's
yeah, like
it's about being in again, it's if we can't live off road either, right? Like our brains are learning machines. You don't think about every step you take.
yeah,
And when you drive, your systems are there to make sure your reflexes kick in if the 18-wheeler comes at you. So yeah, the trances are a necessary natural part of it. It's when the bad guys use them to pervert things, right? That's where I think we can appreciate the difference, and so we
mm,
can know uh where things are coming from. We become more mindful of like, well, what's really guiding this trance,
yeah,
this thing that we're doing, that we're up to, or that has been presented to us.
yeah. Just go inside, find silence, and the hill will get
Breathe
easier and
in
easier.
4 seconds, breathe out 6 seconds. That's
Yeah,
how I start.
yeah. Or
The
fill up
long exhale is nice.
or fill up a Burger King cup with red wine and just walk around saying life in the big city. Yeah, or just listen to Tim
Occasionally,
Dillon. What?
occasionally, yeah. I mean, bird cup with red wine sounds fine
Sometimes
every
you
now
gotta
and then,
smoke an
right?
indoor ciggy and just say life in the big city. That's fine too.
Exactly.
Just not every day for the rest of your life. That's hell.
Yeah, we just got to keep as long as we keep our eye on the prize, we'll
Amen.
have plenty of fun along the way.
Amen. Yeah, that's the other thing. Is like meditation is like a very fun process as well. But yeah, I think I have it all. I put it in the description. I put the article. I think I put your website. I think I put your podcast.
Just to put
Um,
my Substack, Age of Muses,
can you?
and yeah, put
I
that
think I
you
put
can.
it in there. Let me check
Okay,
right
good.
now. Let me check right now to make sure.
Yeah,
Um,
because I'm coming out with new deep dives. Like that's what I've been working on for a while now. So I had the previous ones from Trance to Transcendence,
I put
uh,
in. No,
defeating the magicians.
I put in the article that was in question, and I put in your podcast. I didn't put in your Substack. Can you email that to me, and I'll just
Yeah,
copy
I'll
and
email it
paste
to you
it.
right after.
All right, perfect. Yeah, if you could just send that to me, and I'll put it right in the description, just so I don't fuck it up. Um,
Right on. Well, thank you for the invitation. Nice
yeah,
chat.
absolutely,
Uh,
dude.
now I got to go shovel some snow, and we're both in a snowstorm. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
we're
no,
not
yeah,
alone. We're not
yeah.
alone.
Yeah, I know. And if this fire alarm goes off again, I'll burn this fucking building to the ground. That's if it goes off, I'm gonna lose. We're having this like nice long talk about like meditation. If that fire alarm went off, I'll scream and punch this fucking mic. He'd be like, "What was that? I thought we were talking about like mindfulness." And I'll be like, "Fuck this fucking yeah." I'll lose my mind. If it goes off again, I will lose my mind. Um,
That's the beauty of being human. It's
that's
okay.
that's the humbling
We'll
aspect.
we'll make it through the other side.
As Ram Dass would say, he's like, if you ever think you've reached a moment of enlightenment, go spend a weekend with your in-laws.
Right.
You go,
Right.
oh, I am still fucking an angry human.
That's not a bad one.
Yeah, but yeah, let's email me that link and then I will use that as a reminder myself and we'll schedule another one. And yeah, dude, love to get back at it.
Absolutely. And I'm getting a call right now, so this
All
is
right,
perfect
awesome. Let's
time
wrap this
to
up. All right, dude,
thank you
thank you
for
so
the
much.
invitation
Yes, sir.
and talk soon.
Yes, sir. Everybody.